I'm Sandra Cohen Cantor. Today is December 26th, 2014.
Okay, Sandra, thank you for coming.
Sure.
I know you have a very interesting history about your family, and a large family at that. So tell me, where and when did your family come to Dallas, Texas?
Okay. Of my four grandparents, they were all born in Europe. We'll start with my mother's side. My mother's father's side, the Roth family, they came in through Galveston in the late 1800s. Most of them are in the Houston area. Galveston, they lived in Texarkana for a while. Actually my mom's family, my mom's parents were all around. They were peddlers, and they lived in Corsicana, Texarkana, Waxahachie. So the little Jewish peddler all around. And my grandmother on my mother's side, and it's sort of an interesting story. The story goes that they came to the United States wanted to come through Ellis Island, but my grandmother had some eye issues. Don't know what it was, but they sent them back. And then they heard...
Back to where?
Back to, I'm not sure, according to my research, they had gotten on a ship in Germany, but they're originally from the Russia-Poland area. Sorry, it's probably my son calling, but... Okay. So they were sent back, and then they heard that it was a little lax coming through Galveston, so they came back through Galveston and got in to the United States that way.
About when was that?
That was the late 1800s, I believe. And that was my mother's parents, the Roth side and the Frost side. Both of my grandparents, all of my grandparents are buried at the Dolphin Cemetery here in Dallas. Now for my father's family, they are more well known here in Dallas. My maiden name is Cohen, part of the Cohen Candy Company, if anybody remembers that. And what happened there was my uncle Israel, who was a tailor, he was the first to come to this country, and he was traveling from Ellis Island to Florida, where there were some relatives. I think the story goes he ran out of money when he got to Dallas, and so he stayed, and he got a job, and he told the rest of his family back in Pushalot, Lithuania, to come to Dallas. So they came through Ellis Island. They had one child, my uncle Ben Cohen. He was already born in Lithuania. They were traveling to Texas. There was relatives in Baltimore. They stopped in Baltimore. My uncle Morris Cohen was born there. They kept coming, made it to Dallas, and the rest of the kids, there was 8 of them, were all born here in Dallas. The story goes, I never saw it. I'm 58 years old at this moment. They had a big mansion somewhere on the corner of South Boulevard and Cleveland Streets, where when the relatives would come, they'd all stay at this big place. I've heard amazing things. They've got a wraparound porch and all these rooms. I wished I could have seen it. Some of my cousins remember it. Marilyn Heckman Agus, we've talked about it many times, and she remembers it well. She's a bit older than me. And I wanted to show a picture. This is my grandparents and my father. This is my father, Eli Cohen, over here. Next to him is Morris Cohen, who was married to Bess Coleman. This is my Aunt Annie. Let me see. I'm sorry, this is my Uncle Mike. It's hard to see from back here. This is my Aunt Annie, my Uncle Morris. He was married, but didn't last very long. She was from Fort Worth. My uncle Frank Cohen, who was a very prominent doctor in Fort Worth, and my uncle Ben, the firstborn. These are the twins, Mary and Sari, and my grandparents on my father's side. Interesting.
Beautiful picture.
Thank you. Interesting. His name was M.B. Cohen, Mendel Barrel, but his real name was Barramendel. When he came to this country, he used his initials, this is not to sound so Jewish, and everybody said, you can't say BM. That's not nice. It means something not nice. So he switched it from BM to MB.
Smart move.
Yes.
But when your parents were here, what did they do for a living?
As I said, my uncle Israel, when he first came, was a tailor. And then when the rest of the family, his brother, my grandfather, came, they did kind of a little bit of everything. They had a grocery store in the back of their house. They dealt in candy. They would buy and sell candy. Something very interesting, my grandfather, he would help indigent Jewish people coming through getting jobs. He would give them rags and say, go to these houses and ask them if they need their rags cleaned. And you take the rags, you wash them, then you bring them back for a fee. And one thing I wanted to say also about my grandfather, I don't know if anybody has seen this book, They Came to Stay, about the Dallas Jewish community by Rose Bitterman. And in there is a little snippet about my grandfather. It says they came about 1910, I think it was a little bit earlier than that, and started selling fruit and confectionery, later engaging in different types of businesses, the last being the Cohen Grocery next door to his house. 3 of his sons, Ben, Mike, and Morris, would later organize the Cohen Candy Company. What is most interesting to me is that MB was known to be a very religious and charitable man and helped anyone in need, from setting up a man in business to setting up the help fund for the Jewish old folks. And that is the preliminary organization that started Golden Acres, the Home for Jewish Aged. After his funeral in 1934, the hearse and procession stopped at each synagogue here in Dallas, and the doors would be opened for a few minutes as a sign of respect for his piety and good deeds. Sorry, but I'm very, very proud of that.
Where were the synagogues back then?
I don't know.
1934?
There's Anshai Sfard, I've heard of that one. There was Temple, I believe, Temple Emmanuel. Gudasachem.
I'm not sure if Teferet was around.
I don't
And
know.
Sheriff was around.
And Sheriff.
Yeah.
Because
so
we
they
were
were all in
Sheriff.
South Dallas.
They were all in South Dallas. Yes.
Now, did you grow up, were you in South Dallas, your
Was
family, or
not.
had they already moved?
They had already
north?
moved north.
Where did you grow up as a
I
child?
grew up in a little duplex off of Del Norte. It's right across from Temple Emmanuel. So,
Okay, so what was the neighborhood like back then?
oh, it was wonderful. I mean, tons of Jews, and there was a park called Thackeray Park. We had relatives all in the area. I would walk to this cousin, I would walk to that cousin. We'd meet up at the park. It was very nice. Now, when I was 5 years old, we moved from that location to farther north on Williamstown Road, which is closer to LBJ, in between LBJ and Forest off Preston. But my grandmothers both lived in that duplex. My father's mother on one side and my mother's mother on the other side. So I was always there, even though we had moved north.
So you probably have wonderful childhood memories.
I do.
Tell me a little bit about your school life. What was that like, and what did you get involved in when you were young at school?
I went to school at J.J. Pershing Elementary School. I was involved in most whatever was going on. However, in 7th grade, my mother, Fanny Roth Cohen, passed away right before my bat mitzvah. So it was kind of a hard time at that point. Then when I went to Franklin and Hillcrest, I got very, very involved with BBYO. and it was a godsend to me. That was my social outlet. It was where I made my best friends, and actually later it is how I met my husband. Even though he was not a BBYO, his sister Sharon Barron was very involved, and she was the secretary for many, many years, and she fixed us up. So I credit BBYO with a lot of my adulthood and childhood.
Okay. Where did you go to college, and what did you get involved in there?
Interesting. I went away at the beginning to the University of Arizona and got very involved with Hillel and UJA there. But I was so involved that I kind of let my studies go and had to withdraw before I flunked out. Came back, came to Dallas, and got very involved at Richland Community College, and myself and a couple of other friends, we organized a group of Jewish students that at Richland, and it actually broke out to more of the community colleges. It was Brookhaven and Richland. It's mainly where the only Jews were, and we organized that student group. While I was there, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and my father was a member of the Jewish War Veterans. He had gotten the publication that came, magazine that came, and in there they were talking about a new Jewish studies program at Ohio State University. And I started thinking, when I was in Arizona, I got very involved with Hillel and UJA, and back here I organized this Jewish student group. It seemed like the Jewish stuff was all I was really interested in. And I decided to go into Jewish education at that time. Went to Ohio State, met with the head of the program, and there I went. I transferred, got a degree in Jewish studies, came back to Dallas, and I've been working at Solomon Schechter / Levine Academy ever since 1980. Also have taught at Temple Emmanuel, Temple Shalom, and Shereth Israel.
Well, then I don't need to ask if you have synagogue affiliation, right?
My family's
Yes,
affiliation
yeah.
is with Shereth Israel. I'm very proud to say that I am a 4th generation member of Shereth.
Okay, that's quite something.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many Dallasites can say that.
That is true.
What are your fondest recollections of Jewish holidays, or what one was your favorite, would you say, as a youngster growing up?
Gosh, so many great holidays. Because I had such a big family. Passover, the first night with one side, the second night with the other side. Loved that. Hanukkah was always fun. Oh, I will never forget. I don't know how this tradition started. We would have Hanukkah with my mom's side, and one year we would call people back, come here. And my parents had bought these striped pajamas for everybody in the family. So they'd call one person back, and then they'd come out wearing these striped pajamas. Then they'd by the end of the night, everyone was wearing these striped pajamas. We looked like Mr. Peppermint. If anybody knows who Mr. Peppermint was on TV, children's, it was hysterical. And so Hanukkah, that was a big thing.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. We just had all the holidays.
Do you think you had a role model, or not necessarily so, for your activities and involvement in Jewish organizations, etc.?
I credit my parents as my role models. They worked hard. They were involved with the Jewish community, and by osmosis, I guess I followed in their footsteps.
What did your mom do? You said your dad was in JWB.
My mom was in, she was in Hadassah. She wasn't very active. I'm a life member of Hadassah. I'm not very active there. But all of her friends, they had canasta games. My mom didn't do mahjong. But canasta was a big deal. And it was with all the Jewish ladies, and I don't remember her being in an actual organization,
Okay.
just affiliated with.
Can you tell me a project that has been very memorable for you that you've worked on? Something in your professional life?
When I was a BBYO advisor, there were two things. One, we had a advisor weekend, and I was in charge of planning the services. I will never forget, we did a service where everybody was blindfolded, and it was a big success, and everybody told me how spectacular it was. Along those lines, BBYO was setting up its first ever advisor trip to Israel, and my co-advisor Diane Bomash and myself were a part of that first trip. It was fabulous. Even though I had been to Israel through the teen tour of Dallas, now as an adult I was going as a BBYO advisor. It was very special to me. And as far as my professional career, dealing with young children, hopefully imparting a love of Judaism and seeing their faces light up when we sing Jewish songs, that's probably the most inspirational for me.
How many years did you say you've been teaching?
Since 1980, and now we're in almost 2015, so you figure it out. I'm a preschool teacher, I don't do math well.
That's okay, that's good. Are you involved in any civic organizations in the city besides religious organizations?
I was, for a time, involved with voters' rights and the Democratic Party. I have kind of changed my politics a little. I would consider myself an independent. But that's really about it. And I am now active in the Jewish War Veterans, as my father was and as my husband is now.
Okay. Now you mentioned that your sister-in-law was instrumental in getting you and your husband together.
Yes.
Expand that a bit. What happened?
Okay. As I said, I was an advisor, so she knew me in that realm. And she tried to fix me up with her brother at one point. I don't even remember meeting him. And as it turns out, I guess it wasn't a match at the beginning. He ended up going on to marry somebody else who was not Jewish. And 10 years later, that marriage had fallen apart. And I was talking to Sharon Barron again, and another cousin of mine was with me and says, "Don't you know anybody from my nice, sweet cousin Sandra?" And she said, "Yes, my nice, sweet brother Alan." And I was like, "Alan?" She says, "Yes, I tried to fix you up 10 years ago." And I didn't remember. She fixed us up again. And it was history. That he remembered meeting me. He remembered what I was wearing. I don't remember any of that. But
You left a good impression.
I guess so.
Where and when were you married?
We were married in 1995, May of 1995, at Shereth, Israel.
And where did you live originally?
Originally,
As a couple.
as a couple, we lived in my parents' home on Williamstown, although my parents had been deceased for quite a while. As I said, my mom died in 1970, and my dad died in 1982, I believe. And we didn't get together till much later. But that was our first home. And that's where my son was born.
I was just going to say, tell us about your family.
I have one son, and I'm very proud to say he's very involved with BBYO as well, and I hope it continues to mean as much to him as it does now and as it did to me.
Very good. Just thinking back for a minute, what was Dallas like when you were much younger? A little, just in a capsule form, what would you say it was like?
It was a community. It was family. I felt comfortable here. I would never want to move away. I want to tell you one story that stays with me. As I said, I'm a preschool teacher, and one of the teachers at Levine, she was a teacher, and her daughter was in my class. And get together at faculty meetings, and we were talking. And I said something about how Dallas is changing with the influx of the Northerners, the New Yorkers, the East Coast people. And I didn't mean it negatively, but when I was growing up, you never locked your doors. You know, you would never think of that. And as people are coming into Dallas, and I guess I offended her by saying Northerners or New Yorkers, she pulled her child out of my class and said, I think that Sandra is prejudiced against New Yorkers. I'm married to a New Yorker. I don't know how this could be, but that's the main difference. When I was growing up, even the Gentiles, we were a community. I never felt ostracized for being Jewish. I mean, yes, they would come and try and give you Bibles, and yes, sometimes you're a Christ killer, but for the most part, I didn't have to deal with a lot of that.
In general, can you think of anybody besides your parents? Maybe not, but can you think of anyone else that might have been a strong, significant impression on, like a role model for you?
Yes.
Besides your folks.
There were some very special teachers that I had at Sherith Israel. Actually, I just went to a funeral of one, Maurice Nevelo. He, Dr. Norman Kaplan, Barbara Fagan, who was probably the biggest role model for me. I had some great Jewish teachers at Sherith Israel that I believe helped formed who I am.
And you personally, what are you the most proud of that you've done so far?
I think I said earlier, what I'm most proud of is hopefully instilling a love of Judaism to these kids that I'm with every day. You know, and I'm proud of my family, not just my parents, but the people that I didn't know. And that led me to find out what kind of people are they. And in 1980, I forgot when it was, 82, I went on a roots trip to Lithuania. My cousin Sid Stahl had paved the way when it started opening up, when the Soviet Union started opening up. He was a city councilman, and he went as an envoy of the city, and he was able to find the shtetl where we were from, where my great-grandmother's grave, his grandmother's grave would have been.
And were they anything intact?
Oh, yes.
Still?
Yeah, I mean, it was, there was a Jewish cemetery, and he found the grave of his grandmother, my great-grandmother. And as I said, I followed in his footsteps, and that was probably, yes, being in Israel twice was fabulous, but this was something I got to see where my family actually came from. And I respected these people so much. They were real mensches, and I wanted to see what kind of life molded them, and it was a big eye-opener.
Was that a private tour, or was that with a group?
It was a group. It was a Jewish studies learning group, and they were just starting out to try and take people to the various shtetls and the various whatever, and it was just one of the most moving experiences that I've had. And then I came and spoke about it here at the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. That's what this article is about in the Text Jewish Post. And I also reported on it at my big family reunion that we used to have in Florida, on my father's mother's side. It was a big family there. I got relatives all over the place.
Are you still having those reunions?
No, it
Not
stopped.
anymore?
It stopped.
Completely stopped?
Yeah,
Oh, that's a shame.
it is a shame. It is a shame.
Where was the last one, and how many came?
Jacksonville, Florida is where it was based. And I know I still have a lot of family there named Shimmer. but it's fallen apart, and I guess it must have been probably 1980, 1985, somewhere around it was starting to dwindle. So.
Well, this has been wonderful. Is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to add to let people know?
Just, I love Dallas, and I love the Jewish community, and I hope that this will be something that people can look back and say, this person felt this way, and even the newcomers. And I'm really, I promise you, I'm not prejudiced against any newcomers. I'm glad that the Jewish community is growing and flourishing. That's it.
Thank you, Sandra.